Hello again. Well, you might not be able to get much fitter in the 2 weeks before your main event or any event, but you can do quite a lot to improve your performance. You can use the time that you're not spending training because you're tapering to do quite a few different things that might improve your performance. I've got a list of 10 things that you can do. Firstly, you can spend some time looking at the route. If it's a route that you've had to create yourself, then spend some time reviewing that. Make sure that if you think it's an actual road with tarmac on it, it is actually a road with tarmac on it, because you can easily get caught out. These planning tools like Strava, Komoot, Ride with GPS, they're not perfect, particularly in areas that aren't well populated or well ridden. Make a note of key sections on the route, and either you can take them to your stem, or if there are a lot of points, if it's a very long event, take them to your top tube. We were chatting with somebody last night at our workshop, and he tapes he does long Audax events, and he puts a list of the time limits at the various control points along his top tube. On top of knowing the route, the sort of physical things that you have to deal with, knowing yourself's very important, and trying to map those personal traits to the requirements of the event is really useful. You can see where you think you might perform well, where your strengths relate well to the course, and where are you weak, where you're going to have to dig deep, what's going to happen in certain areas that you normally find difficult. What are the best foods for you? What are the worst foods for you? How can you get them? If it's going to be difficult to get your favourite food, can you get a compromise in the area that the event is? Or if it's a supported event, are you going to carry your favourite food, or are you going to rely on what's supplied at the feed stations? Because they might not be perfect for you, but they might work for you. Like I'm quite good. I can tolerate a lot of different foods and fuel sources. Whereas Claire, my partner, she struggles with things, so she has to plan and carries a lot more food than I might do. And how are you going to deal with these poor feelings if your mood drops, if you're tired, if you're excessively tired, if something goes wrong? How are you going to deal with them personally? When might they happen? What specifically might happen? And the more decisions you can make up front, the more you can map the event demands to your strengths and weaknesses, the more you can prepare for the events that might happen during the event. And what can you improve? So if you've got a list of things, maybe your weaknesses now, you've compared your strengths and weaknesses to the event demands, which you obviously would have done at the outset when you did your training plan, but now you're at the event and your training plan might not have gone perfectly. What are these weaknesses, and are there any that you can change? Because you might not be able to change your fitness in 2 weeks, but you can develop certain skills, or you can develop workarounds and learn how to deal with them. So sort of be pragmatic now. What can you do? Make a list of things you can do, and then work on them. It might be that you can improve your descending skills a bit if there are long technical downhills, even on the road. It might not be that you go much faster on a long technical descent on the road, but if you get more comfortable and practice descending techniques, you can save a lot of energy. It's less stressful. You're less likely to have an accident, and as a consequence, if it's less stressful, you're going to be less tired going into the next climb or the next harder section, the next physically harder section. So think about what you can do in this last 2 weeks to improve your performance or make your performance easier. Having done the event demands, your personal strengths and weaknesses, things you might be able to improve, then review your goals. Think about what's an acceptable performance. It's usually best to have perhaps 3 goals. One is you hope to achieve a realistic goal. One's a stretch goal, which is if everything goes perfectly, you might achieve it. And then what's an acceptable goal? And having done this up front is really useful, because the chances are when you get to the event, you'll think, I could have done this a little bit better. Could I have gone faster? Could I have worked harder? And having these predefined acceptance criteria or hoped for goal or stretch goal, it means that you've got an objective view of things, rather than letting, if you use the Steve Peters model, letting your chimp take over and say, oh well, it's rubbish, You might have won, but the fast people didn't turn up. So a common one is, well, that's one of the things that Claire uses if she wins a race. Having these goals predefined is really useful, and you can review them based on the work that you've just done in the first 3 steps that I've described. And then review all the information that's available to you. There's often a lot of useful information available on the event websites. So I know bikepacking events like the Atlas Mountain Race, it tells you where all the resupply points are. So you can spend time reviewing that and see whether your ride plan matches the event, the event details that you can check out. Do you have to have certain kit? And if so, what is that kit? Have you got it? If you turn up on the start line and you don't meet the actual criteria specified in the rules, you might be disqualified before you even get started. So review the rules, both the specific requirements that you have to, the criteria that you have to meet, and also the additional information that's available that can be quite helpful in planning your performance, your ride, and how you deal with things along the way. Think about cultural aspects of the environment. If it's a long race like the transcontinental race, you're going to have various changes in culture. Even something like the Three Peaks race, which starts in Vienna and finishes in Barcelona, there's going to be cultural changes as riders move from Austria into, well, depending on which route they take, Switzerland or Italy, and then France, and then eventually Spain. Things like lunchtime changes. So if you shops often close in this sort of part of Europe for lunch. So if you're wanting to get resupply, then you need to be aware of that. And in the sort of Austria, Switzerland and France, lunchtime starts at 12, so shops shut at 12 or 12:30. And in Spain, lunchtime can start at 2 o'clock and finish it, the shops don't reopen until 4. So if you think, I'll wait until after lunch to pick up my resupply because I've got this big mountain to get over, I don't want to carry food up the mountain, and you get down to the other side at 2 o'clock, the shops have just shut and you've got another 2 hours before you can get any food. And then of course logistical things like, are you going to travel the day before, a week before? Are you going to be there a few days beforehand? What's the sign-on procedure? It's often much more useful to sign on the day before the event if you can do that, because it then gives you, all you have to do on the race day is turn up on the start line. That's certainly something that I always try to do, is get the registration out of the way the day before if I can, and then all you have to do is worry about getting to the start line with all your stuff, and get started and enjoy the event, or if we call it type 2 fun, I think is the term, but get started and do the event. So when's the sign on, when's the start time, are there any cut-off times that you have to be ahead of? You're likely to get disqualified if you miss the cut-off, so you complete the event on your own, in your own time. What's your warm-up? If you need to have a warm-up, say you're going to have a fast start, you need to have a warm-up. When do you have to finish your warm-up? Do you have to put stuff back in your vehicle, or have you got somebody with you that can tidy everything up afterwards so that you can just finish your warm-up and get straight to the start line? How far is it from where you're going to be warming up to the start line? Do you have to be on the start line 15 minutes before, which you often do in shorter events, mass start events like that? So it's really useful actually to have a list with times as you get close to the event. So like weeks before your event, you know what you've got to do weeks before the event. But when you actually got to get to the start line at a certain time, when do you have to leave the place you're staying, or when do you have to leave home? What time do you have to get there? Are you going to start your warm-up at a certain time? When do you have to finish your warm-up? When do you have to be on the start line, and when is the actual start? And a list of things that you need to take with you so that you don't forget anything. If you are travelling the day before the event or a few days before the event, where are you going to be staying? Are you going to be able to get a good night's sleep? If you're not sure what the place has available for you, are you going to get a good meal that suits you? If you've got any special dietary restrictions, or if you don't like certain foods, it can be difficult to get what you want. So are you going to take food with you? Claire and I are both vegan, so when we go to events we quite often take a meal just in case. We might like to eat out, but often it's better to have something that and not take the chance of, if you don't eat the night before an event, then you're potentially in a lot of trouble, and your performance is going to be compromised. So what you're going to do to make sure you get a good night's sleep, get to bed when you want, take earplugs if it's potentially going to be noisy so that you don't have to be kept awake by people partying all night. Make sure you get the right food, make sure you've got food for breakfast, because hotel breakfast, if you're in a hotel, might not be what you want. If you're travelling a long way, like I know a lot of you might be flying to events, I know a lot of you are doing Paris, and of course if you don't live in France, you might be flying. I coach some people in the USA that are doing PVP, and of course they've got to fly there. What happens if the bikes get damaged? Are there bike shops available? Will you be able to get the parts? Is it worth carrying a few spare parts? Even in a long event, is it worth carrying a few spare parts in case they get damaged? But if something gets damaged in transit, you might not make it to the start line if you can't get the part fixed. So either think about whether it's worth carrying some spares, and obviously PVP, there's going to be bike shops in Paris, so as long as you're there a couple of days before, you should be able to get things fixed. But maybe knowing where the nearest bike shop to where you're staying is would be useful. And basically all this is what we call what ifs. We started doing that when we were before the London Paralympics with Karen Dark in 2012, and we've been doing it ever since. I do it with most of my athletes before the event, whether that's formally called what ifs, but we have a meeting and we talk through these things that might go wrong. It's helpful to have somebody guide you through it, ask some pointed questions, particularly if they've got a bit of experience. If you want to do that with me, then we could do a short meeting, a consultation, and you can book that through the website. I'd be very glad to do it and give you the benefit of my experience. And then of course, finally, get plenty of rest in the last 2 weeks. Make sure you're not overly tired when you get to the start line, and make sure your nutrition's good, and basically have a good lifestyle in the period up to the event. I hope you find that useful, and I hope you use the process to think about your event. And even if that process just picks up on one small thing, you've improved your performance, so it's definitely worth it. Let me know how you get on. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.